Airport bosses stripped an aging night guard of his badge and marched him past his coworkers after accusing him of a $200,000 cargo theft. Weeks later, during a coordinated attack on the terminal, a buried phone call from Gate C-14 put his name back in the command room. The first thing most people noticed about Ethan Brooks was the limp. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't drag his leg. He didn't use a cane. He didn't make a show of pain the way some men did when they wanted the world to know they'd survived something. It was just a slight stiffness in his right knee, a hitch in his stride that showed up more on cold nights, especially when the Iowa wind rolled flat and hard across the runways at Des Moines International Airport. People saw it and made their own quiet explanations. Old football injury. Bad hip. Man's getting up there. At 61, Ethan had the kind of face that disappeared in a crowd. Weathered skin. Silver hair cut short. Calm gray eyes that rarely gave anything away. He wore a navy blue airport security uniform, drove a small electric patrol cart through quiet terminals after midnight, and drank coffee so bitter most people poured it out after one sip. To the younger guards, he was just Brooke. If you enjoy stories of courage, justice, and redemption, subscribe to The Wrong Man, Axar? Then drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to welcome you. The old guy on nights. Dependable. Quiet. A little slow. Nothing special. And that was exactly how Ethan wanted it. Because before he ever wore an airport security badge, before he ever walked under fluorescent lights checking emergency exits and locked utility doors, Ethan Brooks had spent 23 years in the United States Army. Not behind a desk. Not in some comfortable stateside post. Ethan had been a Special Forces medic, a Green Beret, an 18 Delta. He had gone places that didn't appear on maps handed to tourists. He had trained foreign fighters in mountain villages, treated children in burned-out schools, pulled wounded Americans out of alleys where the radios barely worked, and made decisions in the dark that still found him in dreams. His job had been simple in theory and nearly impossible in practice. Save lives, complete the mission, bring people home if there was any breath left in them. He had jumped from aircraft into black water. He had crossed borders without flags. He had held pressure on wounds with one hand while firing back with the other. He had carried men twice his size through smoke, sand, blood, and screaming metal. Some of those missions had medals attached to them. Some had names etched into black granite. Some had never officially happened at all. But Ethan didn't talk about any of that. Not to coworkers, not to airport management, not to passengers who asked him where baggage claim was. Not even much to his daughter, Emily, though she knew enough to understand that her father's silence wasn't emptiness. It was weight. Ethan had already lived his war stories. He didn't need to perform them for strangers. These days, all he wanted was peace, so he walked the terminals. He checked alarm panels. He helped lost passengers find their gates. He carried bags for elderly travelers who insisted they didn't need help, then smiled when they thanked him anyway. On snowy nights, he made sure shuttle drivers knew which families had been waiting longest in the cold. When a 7-year-old boy wandered away from his mother near Concourse C, Ethan found him sitting behind a row of vending machines, crying into the sleeve of his Spider-Man hoodie. Ethan crouched down carefully, ignoring the ache in his knee, and said, "Hey, partner, you hungry?" The boy nodded. Ethan bought him a pack of crackers and kept him calm until airport police arrived with his terrified parents. When an elderly woman from Cedar Rapids missed her, connecting flight to Phoenix, Ethan stayed with her for almost 2 hours, called her daughter, arranged a nearby hotel shuttle, and slipped the driver $20 to make sure she got checked in safely. When a maintenance worker almost opened a live electrical panel that had been mislabeled during renovations, Ethan noticed the wrong tag, stepped in, and stopped a fatal accident with nothing more than a quiet, "Hold up a second." People began to trust him. Not because he demanded respect, because he earned it in little ways, night after night. Among those who seemed to trust him most was Kevin Harris, the airport's security team leader. Kevin was 42, polished, ambitious, and good at making important people feel comfortable. He had perfect hair, expensive shoes, and the kind of handshake that came with eye contact just a second too long. To upper management, Kevin looked like the future of airport security. He smiled in meetings. He spoke confidently. He used phrases like proactive threat posture and interagency coordination with just enough authority that nobody asked too many follow-up questions. And whenever Ethan quietly solved a problem, Kevin always seemed to be standing close enough to receive the credit. "Brooks is my best guy," Kevin would say, clapping Ethan on the shoulder in front of supervisors. "Old school, reliable, couldn't run this shift without him." Ethan would just nod and go back to work. He didn't care about applause. He had been given medals in rooms where half the men who deserved them weren't alive to stand beside him. After that, workplace praise didn't mean much, but Kevin cared. Kevin cared deeply. And over time, something inside him began to twist. Because the truth was, Ethan noticed things other people missed. A loading door left unsecured. A camera pointed 3 degrees too far east. A contractor badge used outside approved hours. A cargo checkpoint where paperwork moved faster than the freight did. Small things, but security failures are rarely born from one dramatic mistake. They are built from small compromises, stacked one on top of another, until one day the whole structure collapses. Ethan understood that. Kevin did too. But Kevin had reasons for wanting certain things overlooked. For nearly a year, Kevin had been taking money from a private logistics contractor named Northline Solutions. On paper, Northline handled overflow cargo inspections and equipment maintenance at the airport. In practice, they were cutting corners to save money, and Kevin was approving those shortcuts in exchange for monthly payments routed through a consulting account under his brother-in-law's name. At first, it was small. A missed inspection, a delayed report, an access badge renewed without full verification. Then the money got better. So did the risks. By the time Ethan started noticing irregularities, Kevin was already in too deep. One cold Tuesday night in January, Ethan found a serious vulnerability in the cargo screening process near Bay 12. A Northline crew had been bypassing part of the secondary screening protocol by using an old access override that should have been disabled months earlier. It wasn't a paperwork issue. It was a hole, a real one. The kind that could allow contraband, weapons, or worse into a secure airport zone. Ethan documented everything. Times, badge numbers, door logs, photos of the override panel. Then he brought it straight to Kevin. No drama. No accusations, just facts. Kevin's smile tightened as he looked through the file. "You showed this to anybody else?" Kevin asked. "No," Ethan said. "Figured I'd bring it up the chain first." Kevin nodded slowly. "Good. Smart. I'll handle it." A week later, at a quarterly security meeting, airport executives praised Kevin Harris for identifying a major cargo vulnerability before it became a federal compliance issue. He received a bonus. His photo appeared in the internal newsletter. There he was, smiling under the headline. "Team Leader Harris strengthens airport security." Ethan saw it taped to the break room bulletin board. He read the headline. Then he poured himself a cup of burnt coffee and went back on patrol. He told himself it didn't matter. But Kevin saw the way others still came to Ethan when they were unsure. He saw dispatchers ask Ethan's opinion before calling supervisors. He saw airport police nod to Ethan in passing. He saw maintenance guys stop him in the hall and say, "Hey, Brooks, you got a second?" Kevin had the title. But Ethan had the trust. And to a man hiding secrets, trust looked like a threat. The opportunity to destroy Ethan came 6 weeks later. A shipment of high-end electronics vanished from a secured cargo facility just after midnight. Tablets, medical imaging components, specialized aviation equipment. Total value, over $200,000. By dawn, airport leadership wanted answers. By noon, Kevin had given them one. Ethan Brooks. The evidence looked clean. Too clean. Surveillance footage showed Ethan walking through the restricted corridor near Cargo Bay 9 shortly before the theft. A log entry suggested he failed to perform a required inspection. Another report claimed he ignored an alarm triggered by the cargo door. Kevin personally signed the incident summary. During the internal hearing, Ethan sat across from 3 administrators in a windowless conference room while Kevin stood against the wall, arms crossed, face arranged into professional disappointment. "We have video," one administrator said. Ethan watched the footage on a monitor. There he was, walking slowly down the corridor. Same uniform, same limp. But something was wrong. The timestamp flickered for half a second at the top of the frame. The angle jumped. A shadow appeared where there shouldn't have been one. "This was edited," Ethan said quietly. Kevin sighed. "Come on, Brooks!" Ethan kept his eyes on the screen. "Run the raw file." Not the export, the original. One of the administrators shifted uncomfortably. Kevin shook his head as if saddened by the whole thing. "Don't make this worse." "I didn't steal anything," Ethan said. Nobody in the room seemed eager to believe him. The meeting lasted less than 30 minutes. At the end of it, Ethan's badge was taken from him. His access card was deactivated. His locker was opened in front of 2 witnesses. And then, in full view of dispatchers, custodians, ticket agents, and guards he had trained, Ethan Brooks was escorted out of the Security Operations Center like a criminal. The terminal seemed louder than usual that day. Rolling suitcases, departure announcements, children laughing, employees whispering. Some people looked away when Ethan passed. Others stared. One young guard, a kid named Mason Keller, who Ethan had once helped through a panic attack during a medical emergency, opened his mouth like he wanted to say something. Then Kevin looked at him, and Mason stayed silent. That hurt more than Ethan expected. He had been shot at by men who hated him. He had been left bleeding on frozen ground waiting for extraction. He had heard final words from soldiers who knew they would not see morning. But betrayal had a different kind of blade. It didn't tear flesh. It hollowed out trust. Ethan went home to his small ranch house outside Indianola and sat at the kitchen table until the sun went down over the bare winter fields. He didn't turn on the television. He didn't call anyone. He just listened to the furnace hum and watched the sky go from gray to black. 2 days later, the story hit the local news. At first, it was vague. Airport security employee under investigation in cargo theft. Then it got worse. Someone had tipped the media with just enough detail to make it ugly. By that evening, a reporter stood outside the airport with a microphone in her hand and a serious face. Sources close to the investigation say the suspect is a retired Army veteran who worked overnight security and may have used his knowledge of restricted areas to bypass cargo controls. The next morning, Ethan's name appeared online. Disgraced veteran suspected in airport theft. Retired soldier accused of stealing from secure cargo facility. The comments were worse. Figures. Hero Act probably got old. Bet he thought the rules didn't apply to him. Ethan closed the laptop and set his hands flat on the table. His phone rang all day. He didn't answer most of the calls. Then, that Friday afternoon, Emily came to visit. She was 24, studying nursing at the University of Iowa, all heart and stubbornness in her mother's eyes. She arrived with a duffel bag, a grocery sack, and a look on her face that told Ethan she was prepared to argue with every person in Iowa if necessary. "You should have called me," she said, stepping into his kitchen. "I didn't want you worrying. I'm your daughter." Worrying is in the job description, Ethan almost smiled. She made him sit while she cooked grilled cheese sandwiches the way her mother used to make them, a little too brown around the edges. They ate at the kitchen table, and for a few minutes, the house felt almost normal. Then the doorbell rang. Ethan knew before he stood. 2 sheriff's deputies waited on the porch with a detective from Des Moines and a folded warrant. Behind them, parked at the end of the driveway, was a news van. Emily stepped into the hallway. "Dad?" The detective looked uncomfortable. "Master Brooks, we have a warrant to search the premises, including the garage and any outbuildings." Ethan read the warrant carefully. Then he stepped aside. "Do what you need to do." Emily's face flushed. "This is insane." Ethan said softly. "Let them work." They searched the house for 40 minutes. Drawers, closets, the laundry room, the small bedroom where Emily still kept a box of high school trophies. Then they went into the garage. Ethan stood in the doorway with Emily beside him, watching deputies move around his workbench, his fishing gear, old paint cans, and a stack of storage bins labeled in black marker. One deputy crouched near a shelf Ethan rarely used. "Detective," he called. The detective walked over. From behind a box of Christmas lights, the deputy pulled out a small black access fob with a Northline Solutions sticker on the back. Emily went still. Ethan's jaw tightened. A moment later, another deputy found a sealed aviation component wrapped in anti-static packaging beneath a tarp near the lawnmower. The detective turned slowly. "Master Brooks?" Ethan looked at the items in the deputy's hands. He had never seen them before, but he understood immediately. Kevin had raised the stakes. Emily stepped forward. "Those aren't his, ma'am," the detective said. "Please stay back. You don't understand. He didn't." "Emily," Ethan said. She turned to him, eyes shining with anger. He held her gaze. "Not now. Not like this." Outside, the reporter was already talking into a camera. By 6 o'clock, the footage was everywhere. Deputies carrying evidence bags out of Ethan Brooks's garage. Emily standing on the porch, arms wrapped around herself. Ethan in the doorway, silent and expressionless while the world decided what kind of man he was. That night, the headline changed again. Disgraced, veteran-turned thief, stolen airport component found at former security guard's home. Emily wanted him to fight dirty. "Call somebody," she said, pacing his living room. "You have people. I know you do. Old commanders, federal people. Somebody can stop this." Ethan sat in his chair near the window. His knee throbbed. His face looked older in the lamplight. "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is." "No," he said, and there was steel in his voice now. Not anger. Steel. "It isn't." Emily stopped pacing. Ethan looked down at his hands. "Some of the men I served with are still in places where a name on the wrong record can get people killed. Some missions are still protected for a reason. Some promises don't expire because my feelings got hurt. This is more than feelings. They're destroying your life. I know. Then defend yourself." He looked up at her. "I am the right way." Emily wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand. "The right way doesn't always win." "No," Ethan said quietly. "But it's still the right way." She sat down across from him, and for a long time neither of them spoke. "Finally," she said, "I know you didn't do it." Ethan closed his eyes. For a moment, he couldn't answer. She continued, softer now. "I know who you are." Ethan looked across the room at a framed photograph on the mantel. Emily at 12 years old, sitting on his shoulders at the Iowa State Fair, both of them laughing. "You know the quiet parts," he said. "I know enough." Those words nearly broke him, because when the world strips a man of his name, sometimes one person's faith is the only thing that keeps him standing. For the next 3 weeks, Ethan lived under suspicion. Local law enforcement interviewed him twice. The airport suspended him pending criminal investigation. Former coworkers stopped answering his calls. At the grocery store, he caught a baggage supervisor he knew turning down another aisle to avoid him. A neighbor who used to wave from his mailbox suddenly became very interested in looking at the ground. Ethan did not complain. He did not rage. He made coffee in the morning. He cleaned the house. He iced his knee. He answered questions when investigators called. He slept badly. But while Ethan tried to survive the humiliation, Kevin's lie began to fray. A camera technician named Luis Ortega started acting nervous during follow-up interviews. He avoided eye contact. He changed small details. He requested vacation days he didn't take. An elderly businessman waiting on a delayed flight told an airport police officer he had seen Kevin entering the surveillance control room late one night before the footage was supposedly recovered. A baggage handler mentioned that a Northline Solutions truck had been parked near Cargo Bay 9 with its lights off. None of it was enough. Not yet. Kevin remained calm on the surface, but underneath, fear was eating him alive. Because Ethan had been removed, but the weaknesses Kevin created were still there, and someone else had noticed them. At 8:17 on a Thursday morning in April, Des Moines International Airport erupted into chaos. The first explosion happened below Terminal B, inside a service corridor used by maintenance crews. It was not large enough to bring down the building, but it was powerful enough to rupture pipes, blow out access doors, and send smoke rolling through the lower levels. 3 minutes later, armed men appeared near 2 separate security checkpoints. They weren't random criminals. They moved with planning. They knew which cameras were blind. They knew which doors had delayed alarms. They knew how to force passengers toward choke points. Within 15 minutes, hundreds of travelers were trapped inside secure areas. Several were taken hostage near a gate lounge in Concourse C. Emergency alarms screamed. Parents clutched children. TSA officers pulled people behind counters. Airport police tried to respond but received conflicting information from dispatch. Surveillance feeds dropped in and out. Access control systems locked some doors and opened others. Outside, patrol cars flooded the curbside lanes. Inside the airport's emergency operations center, Panic wore a suit and spoke in acronyms. Kevin Harris stood over a digital map with a radio in his hand, sweating through his dress shirt. "Send units to Concourse A," he ordered. A dispatcher looked up. "Sir, reports say hostages are in C." "No, I just got confirmation they moved." "From who?" Kevin hesitated. No one had confirmation. He was guessing, and every bad guess cost time. Then one of the emergency lines flashed. A dispatcher answered, listened, and looked up sharply. "Kevin, I've got a caller inside Concourse C. She says she's with wounded hostages near gate C14. She says the attackers are moving through service tunnels below the gate area." Kevin's face changed. "Who is it?" The dispatcher pressed her headset tighter. Caller identifies herself as Emily Brooks. She says she's a nursing student. She's treating 2 gunshot wounds and a head injury. For 1 second, the noise in the room seemed to fade around Kevin. Brooks, of course. Emily had flown into Des Moines that morning from a nursing conference in Denver and had been waiting near C14 for her connecting ride home when the attack began. Now she was trapped inside the very concourse Kevin had helped leave vulnerable. The dispatcher covered the microphone. She says she saw 2 men come out of a service door marked maintenance only. She says they're using lower corridors. Kevin felt every eye nearby shift toward him. Service tunnels, blind spots. The hidden routes Ethan Brooks had noticed months ago. If Kevin acknowledged that call, investigators would ask how attackers knew those corridors. They would ask why certain cameras had been misaligned. They would ask why old overrides were still active. They would ask questions that led straight to him. Kevin leaned close to the dispatcher. "Log it as unverified." "What?" "Cell calls during incidents are unreliable. People panic. They think they see things." She sounds calm. "Do you want to be responsible for sending SWAT into a trap based on a scared kid's phone call?" The dispatcher hesitated. Kevin lowered his voice. "Log it as unverified. Do not route it to federal command until confirmed." The dispatcher looked uncertain, but Kevin had the title. So Emily Brooks's call, one of the first accurate reports from inside Concourse C, was buried in the noise. In the gate lounge, Emily pressed a folded scarf against a man's bleeding thigh and tried to keep her hands from shaking. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Look at me. What's your name?" "Paul," the man gasped. "Okay, Paul. I'm Emily. I need you to breathe slow, in through your nose." out through your mouth. You're doing good. A little girl nearby sobbed into a stuffed rabbit while her father lay pale beside a row of seats. Emily looked toward the service door where the attackers had disappeared. She had told them. She had told the people on the phone. Why wasn't anyone coming? Her cell signal flickered. She tried calling her father. The first call failed. The second went to voicemail. On the third try, the line connected for 2 seconds. "Dad," she whispered, crouched behind a tipped-over luggage cart. "I'm in Concourse C, Gate C14. They're using the service tunnels. There are wounded. I'm okay, but..." The line went dead. 20 miles away, Ethan Brooks stood in his living room watching the news. Live footage showed smoke above Terminal B. A reporter shouted over sirens. Authorities are calling this an active, coordinated attack. Ethan's phone buzzed. A voicemail notification. He pressed play. Emily's voice came through broken by static. "Dad, Concourse, Gate C14, service tunnels, wounded. I'm okay." But the message ended. For a moment, Ethan didn't move. Then something changed in his face. Not panic, not fear. Purpose. He turned off the television. He went to his bedroom closet. He did not reach for a weapon. He reached for an old gray field jacket. No patches, no medals, no unit insignia, just cloth, just cover from the cold. He grabbed his keys and drove toward the airport. No one had called him. No one had asked for him. In fact, most of the people there believed he was a criminal. But his daughter was trapped inside. So were hundreds of innocent people. And Ethan Brooks had spent his entire adult life going toward people who needed help. The road into Des Moines International was jammed with emergency vehicles and fleeing passengers. Ethan parked half a mile away and walked, his limp more pronounced now, through wind and sirens. At the outer perimeter, a young deputy blocked him. "Sir, you need to turn around." "My daughter is inside Concourse C," Ethan said. "I can help with evacuees." The deputy looked at his gray hair, his limp, his plain jacket. "Sir, everybody's got someone inside. Move back." Before Ethan could answer, a woman screamed nearby. A shuttle bus had stopped at an angle, its doors open, passengers spilling out in panic. One man had collapsed on the pavement, struggling to breathe. Another woman had blood running down her cheek from flying glass. Ethan moved past the deputy without raising his voice. "Sir!" the deputy shouted. Ethan knelt beside the collapsed man, checked his pulse, opened his airway, and called out, "You in the blue jacket. Find me an Ed. You. Keep that lane open for ambulances. Ma'am, sit down before you fall. Everybody else, move toward the concrete barrier and stay low." His voice was calm, not loud, not panicked, but it cut through the chaos like a flare in the dark. People obeyed before they even knew why. Within minutes, Ethan had organized a makeshift triage area near the shuttle lane. He used luggage tags to mark injury severity. He directed volunteers. He kept families together. He told frightened people exactly what to do in simple words. A Homeland Security official named Mark Delaney noticed from across the staging area. Delaney was in his late 50s, broad-shouldered, with a face carved by years of hard decisions. He had been watching local responders struggle to manage the flood of civilians when he saw the older man in the gray jacket take control of a pocket of chaos. Something about him was familiar. The posture, the voice, the way he scanned rooftops, exits, hands, faces. Delaney walked closer. Then he heard a paramedic say, "Brooks, where do you want this group?" Delaney stopped. "Brooks?" he said. Ethan turned. For several seconds, neither man spoke. 20 years disappeared. Delaney saw a mountainside in Afghanistan. Smoke, incoming fire, a shattered interagency team pinned behind a ruined wall, his own leg trapped under concrete, blood in his mouth, the certainty that he was going to die in a country his children would only know from maps. Then a man moving through dust and gunfire like an answer to prayer. A Green Beret medic. Ethan Brooks. Delaney's face changed. "Sergeant Major Brooks," he said quietly. Ethan gave the smallest shake of his head. "Just Ethan now." Delaney stared at him like he was seeing a ghost. Then he turned toward the command center. "Come with me." Inside the mobile command post, arguments were overlapping so badly nobody could hear the radios. Maps covered every screen. Unit positions were wrong. Camera feeds were missing. Kevin stood at the center of it all, pale and unraveling. When Ethan entered, several officials barely looked up. Kevin did. His eyes widened. "What is he doing here?" Kevin snapped. "He's under criminal investigation." A deputy chief glanced over. "This is Brooks?" Another official stiffened. "The cargo theft suspect?" Ethan said nothing. Delaney's voice cut through the room. "Everybody quiet." The command post fell silent. Kevin pointed at Ethan. "You cannot bring him into this. He's suspended. He may have compromised this airport himself." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he stayed still. Delaney turned slowly toward Kevin. "This man has more real-world crisis response, personnel recovery, combat medicine, and hostage survival experience than anyone standing here," Kevin scoffed. "He's a night guard. He is retired Army Special Forces," Delaney said. 23 years, multiple combat deployments, Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, Soldier's Medal. Classified recovery operations you don't have clearance to read. No one moved. The radios kept crackling, but the room itself seemed to freeze. A SWAT commander looked at Ethan again, really looked this time. The limp no longer seemed like weakness. It looked like history. A federal analyst began typing fast. Records started appearing on a secure screen. Commendations, rescue citations, deployment summaries, redacted operation names. Official language struggling to describe impossible courage. Kevin's mouth opened, then closed. Ethan didn't look proud. If anything, he looked tired. "My daughter is inside Concourse C," Ethan said. "Gate C-14. She left me a message. She says attackers are using service tunnels." The dispatcher at the far table looked up, startled. Kevin shot her a warning glance. Delaney noticed. "What?" Delaney asked. The dispatcher swallowed. "We received a call from an Emily Brooks 20 minutes ago. Same information. Wounded hostages. Service tunnel movement." The SWAT commander turned sharply. "Why wasn't that routed?" Kevin spoke too quickly. "It was unverified. We had conflicting reports." Ethan looked at him then, not with anger, with recognition. A man who had spent his life reading fear knew exactly what Kevin's fear meant. Delaney stepped closer to the table. "Pull the call," Kevin said. "We don't have time for." "Pull it!" The dispatcher played the recording. Emily's voice filled the command post, strained but steady. "My name is Emily Brooks. I'm a nursing student. I'm at Gate C-14 with approximately 17 hostages. 3 wounded, 1 critical. 2 attackers exited through a maintenance door beside the service elevator. They are using lower-level tunnels. Please tell responders not to come through the main concourse. They have that covered." Silence followed. Ethan closed his eyes for half a second. His little girl was terrified, but she was working. Delaney faced Ethan. "Will you assist?" Ethan glanced at the screens, the maps, the bad information, the clock. Then he nodded once. "Show me what you've got. No speech, no drama, just work." Ethan studied the airport schematics for less than 5 minutes before he saw the pattern. "They're not moving through passenger corridors," he said. The SWAT commander leaned in. "Then how are they shifting positions?" Ethan tapped the lower-level maintenance grid beneath Terminal B and C. Service tunnels. Utility access. Some of these connect under the secure zones. Who has current tunnel maps? A fire captain answered. "Those were updated during the renovation." Ethan looked at Kevin. Kevin looked away. Ethan's voice remained calm. "Are the camera blind spots clustered near those access points?" The analyst pulled up overlays. A red pattern spread across the screen. The room went quiet again. Delaney looked at Kevin. How did they know those blind spots existed? Kevin swallowed. No one had time to press him. Ethan pointed to 3 locations. They'll stage here, here, and here. They're using hostages to slow entry, but their real objective is movement. Bomb teams need to check these tunnel junctions. SWAT should not push through the main gate lounge until those lower exits are sealed. M's evacuation route through the west baggage corridor. If smoke hasn't reached it yet, a deputy chief frowned. That corridor's locked down. It has a manual override behind the janitor's closet near Carousel 4, Ethan said. Everyone stared at him. He shrugged. Worked nights. That broke the tension just enough for people to breathe. Then the operation shifted. SWAT teams repositioned. Bomb technicians moved underground. Fire crews opened safer evacuation channels. Dispatch finally had one coherent plan. And at the center of it stood the man they had escorted out weeks earlier in disgrace. Kevin tried once more. This is a conflict of interest, he said. His daughter's inside. He's emotionally compromised. Ethan didn't respond. Delaney did. If his daughter is alive right now, it is because she gave us accurate information that you buried. Kevin went pale. Delaney leaned in. So unless you have something useful to contribute, step back. Kevin stepped back. Not because he wanted to. Because for the first time in years, no one was listening to him. As teams moved, another commander arrived at the mobile post. Fire Chief Daniel Mercer. He was a big man with soot-colored eyebrows and a limp of his own. When he saw Ethan, his face softened into disbelief. "I'll be damned," Mercer said. Ethan looked up. A small smile touched his mouth. Danny. 10 years earlier, before Mercer became chief, he had been trapped under a collapsed parking structure after a tornado ripped through a county fairground. A volunteer rescue team had been pinned down by secondary collapse risks. Ethan, already retired from the Army, had been working disaster response training nearby. He crawled into the void anyway. He found Mercer half-conscious beneath concrete and rebar. He stayed with him for 46 minutes until they got him out. Now Mercer looked around the command post. "If Brooks says there's a way through," he said, "there's a way through." That was all he needed to say. The rescue unfolded with hard, disciplined precision. Not like the movies. No blazing charges. No reckless heroics. Just timing, communication, patience, and courage. Bomb technicians found 2 devices exactly where Ethan predicted they would be. One had been placed near a ventilation junction that could have pushed smoke into a crowded holding area. It was disarmed with minutes to spare. SWAT teams sealed the tunnel exits, cutting off the attackers' movement. Fire crews moved dozens of civilians through the west baggage corridor. In Concourse C, Emily kept working. Her hands were sticky with blood. Her knees ached from kneeling on the hard floor. Her voice had gone hoarse from whispering comfort to strangers. The man named Paul was still breathing. The little girl with the stuffed rabbit had stopped crying, but she held Emily's sleeve like it was the only solid thing left in the world. "What's your rabbit's name?" Emily whispered. The girl sniffed. "Captain!" Emily smiled despite everything. "Captain looks brave. My dad gave him to me." Emily glanced at the girl's father. He was conscious now, barely, his face gray with pain. "Then Captain's got a job," Emily said. "He's going to help us stay quiet until help gets here." A burst of shouting echoed from beyond the gate area. Everyone froze. Then the lights flickered. Emily tightened the scarf around Paul's leg and looked toward the service door. She thought of her father. Not the man on the news. Not the disgraced veteran, her father. The man who checked the locks twice before bed. The man who once drove 3 hours in a snowstorm because she had the flu at college and said she didn't need him. The man who didn't talk about war, but sometimes woke before dawn and sat on the porch like he was waiting for ghosts to leave. If he knew where she was, he would come. She knew that as surely as she knew her own name. In the command post, a radio call came through with static. Multiple wounded near lower service stairwell. Evac route blocked. Possible access to C-14 group from below, but door is jammed. Need guidance now. Ethan looked at the map. The stairwell was near the old mechanical room. There was another way in. Narrow, dirty, forgotten. I know that route, Ethan said. Delaney shook his head. No, we'll send a team. They don't know the door. Ethan. But Ethan was already moving. Mercer caught up with him outside the command post. You're not 25 anymore, the chief said. No, Ethan replied. But they're still bleeding. The route took them through a service entrance, down a concrete corridor, and into a lower utility passage filled with smoke and emergency strobes. Ethan moved with Mercer's firefighters and 2 SWAT officers, not ahead of them like a hero in a movie, but with them, guiding, reading, remembering. His knee protested every step. He ignored it. They reached a maintenance door half hidden behind stacked cleaning supplies. Ethan wiped soot from the keypad, then pointed to a rusted manual latch above the frame. Override's there, he said. A firefighter pulled it. Nothing. Again, Ethan said. The firefighter pulled harder. The door groaned open 3 inches, then jammed. From beyond it came a muffled cry. Ethan dropped to one knee and looked through the gap. A young SAW officer was trapped with several civilians behind a toppled service cart. One woman had a deep cut across her arm. Another man was in shock. And farther beyond, near the gate lounge, Ethan heard a voice he knew better than his own heartbeat. Keep pressure on it. Don't let go, Emily. For the first time that day, Ethan's face cracked. Just a little. Emily, he called. There was a pause. Then, from beyond the smoke, Dad? I'm here, baby. A SWAT officer glanced at him, and something in his expression changed. Not pity, respect. They forced the door open with a hydraulic spreader. Ethan moved in with the firefighters, keeping low beneath the smoke. The gate lounge looked like a disaster ward. Luggage scattered. Ceiling panels down. Blood on polished floor tile. Terrified people huddled behind seats. Emily knelt beside the wounded man, her face streaked with tears and soot, her hands steady. When she saw Ethan, she looked 12 years old and 24 at the same time. He wanted to run to her. He wanted to hold her. But there were wounded between them. So he did what he had taught her without ever saying the words. He worked. Report, he said softly. Emily swallowed hard. 3 serious. 1 arterial bleed controlled with improvised tourniquet. 1 head trauma, confused but awake. 1 chest wound, breathing shallow. Others ambulatory. Attackers left through that service door 8 minutes ago. Ethan nodded. You did good, her chin trembled. I was scared. I know. I kept thinking what you'd do. He looked at the people alive around her. Looks like you figured it out. They began moving the wounded. Ethan lifted the little girl's father under one shoulder while Mercer's firefighter took the other side. The girl clung to the stuffed rabbit and refused to leave. Ethan crouched beside her, ignoring the pain flaring in his knee. What's your rabbit's name? He asked. Captain, she whispered. Ethan nodded seriously. Captain looks like he knows the way out. I need you to help him lead your dad, okay? The girl nodded. Stay right behind Mess, Emily. The girl looked at Emily, then at Ethan. Is she your daughter? Ethan's eyes softened. Yes, ma'am. She helped my dad. Ethan looked at Emily. I know she did. They moved through the service corridor in a tight line. Halfway out, Ethan's knee buckled. Pain shot up his leg, white-hot and blinding. For 1 second, the corridor tilted. Mercer grabbed his arm. Brooks! Emily turned. Dad! Ethan clenched his jaw. Keep moving. And he did. By sunset, the airport was secure. Hostages were freed. Attackers were captured or surrendered. Hundreds of civilians walked out alive who might not have without the coordinated response Ethan helped build and Emily's buried call finally brought to light. News helicopters circled overhead. Reporters shouted questions. Cell phone videos spread online. The country saw clips of the gray-haired former night guard with a limp directing emergency teams, carrying wounded passengers, and standing calmly beside federal commanders who treated him not like a suspect, but like a legend. They saw Emily Brooks, a nursing student with blood on her sleeves, walking out beside a little girl holding a stuffed rabbit named Captain. They saw Ethan put his jacket around his daughter's shoulders. They saw her lean into him for one brief second before paramedics pulled them both toward the triage area. But the biggest truth came afterward. Federal investigators began reviewing every failure that allowed the attackers to exploit the airport. They pulled access logs, financial records, surveillance archives, contractor communications, emergency call recordings, and piece by piece, Kevin Harris's world collapsed. The dispatcher admitted Kevin had ordered Emily's call logged as unverified. The camera technician, Luis Ortega, finally confessed. Kevin had ordered him to manipulate the footage used against Ethan. The stolen electronics had been moved by a Northline Solutions crew through a blind spot Kevin had protected. The incident report had been falsified. Security logs had been altered. Inspection failures had been buried. The Northline access fob and aviation component found in Ethan's garage had been planted by a contractor with ties to Kevin, using information Kevin provided after tipping police and local media. And the vulnerabilities Kevin created for money had later been studied and exploited by the attackers. When federal agents arrested Kevin in the same operations center where he had once watched Ethan be humiliated, he did not look powerful. He looked small, terrified. A man crushed beneath the weight of his own greed. Mason Keller, the young guard who had stayed silent the day Ethan was escorted out, watched from across the room. This time, he didn't look away. Kevin passed him in handcuffs and whispered, "Don't just stand there." Mason looked at him and said, "I should have said something before." Kevin blinked. Mason's voice shook, but he kept going. "I won't make that mistake twice." Ethan was not there to see the arrest. He didn't need to be. He was at the hospital with Emily, sitting beside her bed while a nurse checked the smoke irritation in her lungs and wrapped a burn on her forearm. Emily looked exhausted. "You okay?" Ethan asked. She gave him a tired smile. "You asking as my dad or as the guy who made half the command post look stupid?" "As your dad." "Then no," she said. "Not yet, but I will be." He nodded. After a while, she looked at him. "You came, even though everyone thought you did it." "Yeah, you could have stayed home." "No," she studied his face. "Were you scared?" Ethan looked toward the window. Outside, the lights of Des Moines shimmered against the dark. "Yes," he said. Emily reached for his hand. He took it. 3 weeks later, all allegations against Ethan Brooks were formally dismissed. His name was cleared. The airport issued a public apology. The CO stood in front of cameras and called him a hero. Federal officials praised his courage. Local news anchors who had once repeated the phrase, "disgraced veteran," now spoke solemnly about a decorated Special Forces soldier wrongly accused. Former co-workers sent messages, apologies, invitations for coffee. Some were sincere. Some were ashamed. Ethan accepted the apologies quietly. But he did not pretend the betrayal hadn't hurt. Forgiveness, he had learned, did not mean forgetting. It meant refusing to let bitterness command the rest of your life. One afternoon, Mason Keller came to Ethan's house in Indianola. He stood awkwardly on the porch holding his hat in both hands. "Mere Brooks," Mason said. "I'm sorry." Ethan looked at him. Mason swallowed. "I should have spoken up. I knew something wasn't right. I was scared of losing my job." Ethan studied the young man for a long moment. Then he opened the screen door. "You want coffee?" Mason blinked. "Sir?" "It'll be bad coffee," Ethan said. "But it's coffee." Mason stepped inside. That was all Ethan said about forgiveness. It was enough. Airport executives offered him a senior security leadership position with a large salary and a polished title. Ethan listened politely. Then he declined. "I appreciate it," he said. "But I'm not looking for a corner office." "What are you looking for?" one executive asked. Ethan thought about that. He thought about the men he had carried, the ones he had saved, the ones he couldn't. He thought about Emily, kneeling in Concourse C with blood on her hands, doing the work even while afraid. He thought about the little girl and her stuffed rabbit. Then he said, "Something useful." In the end, he accepted a part-time advisory role training emergency response teams, airport police, firefighters, and security staff on crisis coordination. No spotlight, no fancy title, just work that mattered. Several months later, on a quiet evening, Ethan returned to Des Moines International Airport for the night shift. Same navy blue uniform, same old patrol route, same limp. But the terminal felt different now. Employees who once looked away now stood a little straighter when he passed. Young guards listened when he spoke. Airport police nodded with respect. A janitor named Ray, who had worked there for 30 years, handed Ethan a fresh cup of coffee and said, "Made a new pot. Figured you deserved better than that motor oil." Ethan smiled. "Don't get fancy on me now." Near gate C-14, a little girl tugged on her mother's sleeve and pointed. "That's him," she whispered. "That's the man who helped Captain." Ethan pretended not to hear, but his eyes softened. Later, as midnight settled over the airport, Ethan walked past the tall windows overlooking the runway. Planes lifted,